After over 20 years of working in the comic book industry, I've decided to embark on a new adventure. Join me as I explore the strange and unusual, doing everything from sharing my favorite books, comics, and horror movies, to traveling to abandoned spaces, horror-themed bars and restaurants, and all sorts of spooky spots. Welcome to Curious Haunts. I'm your host, Jeremy Haun. So what scares you? As a horror creator, I get asked that all the time. When I was a kid, everything scared me. I made a choice to get past that fear. I watched all the scary movies at our local video store. Trips to the library took me from Stephen King and Dean Koontz to Bram Stoker, Mary Shelley, and H.P. Lovecraft. The truth is, sometimes I miss that kind of scare I felt as a kid. Every movie I watch, book I read, and weird creepy place I visit, there's this hope that it will make me feel that way again. Like when I was a kid, I realized that most things are scary before I read or see them. When I let my imagination run wild, just based on the screaming, skinless thing in the movie or book cover. Every time I walk through a strange abandoned place or through a dark, murky bit of backwoods, I let the same imagination run wild. And it almost works. At least for a second. Most of the time, that's where my stories come from. Me just trying to creep myself out and feel like that scared kid again. And every once in a while, I find an author or filmmaker that taps into some of that. So today, on Curious Haunts, I'm going to talk about one of those authors. I'm also going to share an amazing 4K special edition release of one of my favorite weird video store finds from the 80s. We'll also finish up the Shining Excursion, where I traveled from Sacramento, California to Portland, Oregon to visit the famous exterior location from Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. But first, let's have a drink. And welcome back to the newly named Coroner Bar. As we wrap up the Shining Excursion this week, I thought I'd make my variation on a martini. In The Shining, thanks to the not-so-subtle nudges from the spirits haunting the Overlook Hotel, Jack Torrance gives in and takes a drink for the first time in over 20 months. Now, in Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining, Jack asked Lloyd the bartender for the hair of the dog that bit me. Bourbon on the rocks. But in Stephen King's novel, Jack asked Lloyd for 20 martinis. You line those Martians up right along the bar, and I'm going to take them down one by one. That's a terrible impression. Sorry. Now, really though, while I enjoy a drink and I'm sharing recipes with you here, I never suggest drinking 20 of anything. Enjoy a drink if you care to, but please do so responsibly. Now, the thing about martinis is that there's a variation for just about every taste and mood. There's everything from the popular espresso martini to the ultra dry Vesper. I enjoy a lot of them, but tonight I'm in the mood for the classic, a dirty martini. It's a simple drink. You can go with either gin or vodka in a dirty martini. I enjoy both, but I tend to go with gin, so that's what we're going to do here. I've really been liking the Botanist Gin from Islay, Scotland. It's the same place that all of my favorite peaty scotches like Laphroaig, Lagavulin, and Ardbeg come from. It's a lovely dry gin, and it makes me think of Scotland. We'll start off with a shaker. I got this fantastic insulated one from the folks at Elevated Craft that I'm using here, but any shaker's going to do. Now, I'm going to take that and add 2.5 ounces of gin to the shaker. After I do that, I'm going to follow it up with a 1/2 ounce of dry vermouth. I'm using Dolin here. I have a confession to make. I'm not a huge vermouth guy. Fortified wines don't always quite agree with me, so I have to tend to go light on them. But today, I'm doing it right with a proper 1/2 ounce. After that, I'm going to add a full ounce of olive brine. Hey, we're going dirty after all. And while I'm all about fancy olives, I love the cheapest of the cheap olive brine for my dirty martinis. Also, another little trick here. I like to put all my olive brine in these handy dandy squeeze bottles. It just makes things easier than dumping out, from the jar. And once I have that, I'm going to go in and add my ice. You just need a couple cubes, no big deal. I'm going to go with 3. Then you want to put that lid on tight, give it a nice twist, and shake the hell out of it for about 30 seconds or so to get good and chilled. Now you want to take and strain that into your cocktail glass. You can use a martini or a coupe glass here. I'm partial to the Nick and Norah glass because it reminds me of the Thin Man. While it's also less likely to, to spill all over myself. To finish out the dirty martini, we'll take and skewer a few olives. Feel free to go crazy here, as crazy as you'd like. No one's gonna stop you from using like 4, whatever, like I do. And there you have it, a dirty martini. And now that we have a nice drink, let's head back to the Odditorium and see what we've got for you today. Part of what I want to do with Curious Haunts is celebrate physical media. Like most of us, when streaming services came around, I bought into the idea that things would be easily accessible in consistent digital formats forever. With company mergers, sales of entire catalogs from one streamer to another, and all sorts of weirdness, some things just aren't available. Now, while a lot of big box stores have moved from carrying most of the physical media we love, a lot of boutique, specialty stores and producers have stepped up to give us some fantastic, truly collectible stuff. So while I'm excited to talk about all the different things I'm reading, watching, and loving, this section is dedicated to cool physical media that just makes me happy. Sometimes those things are going to be new special edition releases. Sometimes they're going to be something old that I found or dug back up from my collection. Today, we've got both of those things. First up, we've got the beautiful thing that awaits us all, a collection of short fiction by Laird Barron. Earlier, I mentioned those rare authors that just get to me. Laird Barron is one of them, maybe even more than just about anybody else. I first found Barron's work thanks to Seth Peck, my co-creator on the post-apocalyptic fantasy comic series, The Realm. The first story that Seth shared with me was from this collection, The Men from Porlock. It's a story of a group of 1920s loggers that venture out into the deep woods of the Pacific Northwest to hunt game for an upcoming company visit, and then it takes this truly unsettling folk horror turn. The Men from Porlock is easily one of my favorite short stories from this collection. Laird Barron writes a certain kind of pulpy horror that just unsettles me in the best sort of way. His prose feels something like Robert E. Howard meets Richard Matheson, with a look to the dark, unknowable vastness of H.P. Lovecraft's mythos. Short story collections are a special thing. I'm probably going to talk about them pretty frequently here on Curious Haunts. Among all of the amazing stuff out there, the beautiful thing that awaits us all is one of my favorites. I have this memory from the late 80s when I was making my way through every horror movie on the shelves at my local video store. The box covers, they terrified me, but I was on a mission to watch them all. In spite of quickly deciding just to go A to Z through the section, I started out picking tapes with covers that looked maybe a little less scary. Forever, I had this vague recollection of picking up one that had purple words on the cover. No screaming skeletons or folks with hatchets in their head. And the movie, it had this weird, shifting giant monster coming out of the fog. And Nazis? For some reason. But it scared the hell out of me. It wasn't Indiana Jones. But I just couldn't remember what it was. Years later, sometime after college, I was watching an old horror flick from the 80s, and there it was. That was the movie I've been thinking about for over a decade. The Keep. Over the years since, I've thought about The Keep, Michael Mann's weird, captivating tale of the cosmic battle between good and evil, set against World War II. I rented it a couple of times, once it was available digitally, and still loved it. But I wanted more. In 2024, as part of their big Black Friday sale, Australian distributor Vinegar Syndrome released a 4K special edition of the film. They had an ultra-limited edition slipcase, which sold out absolutely immediately. And this, still amazing standard edition, which also sold out completely in just 48 hours. While this still isn't the now legendary full 128-minute director's cut, this is the most complete restoration to date. It comes complete with several documentaries talking about everything from the amazing score by Tangerine Dream to the stories of the fraught production and the vision of the film that we may never actually get to see. While I do hope that we get to see that full cut of the film one day, I'm grateful that this edition exists. And if you haven't checked it out, definitely bop over to vinegarsyndrome.com to get yourself a copy. Rumor has it, they have even more in stock. And now, I'd like to invite you on another little trip, where I visit a spooky place or series of places that inspire me. I eat, I drink, I seek out the weird and wonderful. And today, it's time for part 2 of the Shining Excursion. Last time on Curious Haunts, I traveled to Estes Park, Colorado to visit the Stanley Hotel, the world-famous inspiration for Stephen King's The Shining. I spent 2 amazing days touring the hotel, exploring, and even stayed in its most famously haunted room. After that, I made my way to the Mile High City to find the weirder side of Denver before hopping aboard the California Zephyr and heading west on the next leg of the Shining Excursion. I arrived in Sacramento around 4 p.m. The train was running a couple hours late thanks to a heavy snowfall that had, appropriately, blocked the way along none other than the Donner Pass. I now only had 7 short hours in Sacramento, and if I wanted to see even half of the spots on my list, I needed to get going. Another nice perk of upgrading to a room on Amtrak is the first-class lounge at train stations. I was able to leave my luggage with the attendant, grab an Uber, and get on my way. My first stop was the Altar Room. I love all kinds of oddity shops, tiny and esoteric, ridiculous and huge. I'm going to visit them all. Among the shops that I've visited, the Altar Room is something special. I got lucky making it into Sacramento on a Saturday. Open 1 day a week, the Altar Room is more than just an oddity shop. It's a beautifully curated shrine to the strange and unusual, a true cabinet of curiosities. And thanks to the train running late, I made it to the Altar Room just moments before close. Maybe it was the absolute awe on my face, but the owner graciously welcomed me in anyway. Now, because my bags were already overpacked thanks to a couple of single-barrel picks from the vault at the Stanley Hotel and a few amazing finds in Denver, I couldn't quite pick up everything that I wanted to buy. And to be honest, I wanted to buy everything. I made a few choice selections, thanked the owner Shasta for being so wonderfully welcoming, and let her close up for the night. Next up, I made my way to Big Brother Comics in Midtown Sacramento. As a comics creator and creative director for Ignition Press, I always like to visit as many shops as I can while traveling the country. It's nice to see the shops and meet the people behind the counter who work selling the things we make. I chatted with the staff, met the owner, and picked up a few books I've been looking for, and even got a suggestion for a great spot for dinner. As much as I enjoy eating in the dining car on the train, I was looking forward to something a little different. I had sushi on the mind, and made my way to Crew, a contemporary Japanese spot that won me over with the perfect combination of old-school sushi and new-school cocktails. The second I heard that their bar menu featured funky takes on highballs, and even better, an array of cocktails based on Run the Jewels songs, I was in. 100%. I started with their classic old-fashioned, the Run the Jewels. Of course I did. The drinks were fantastic, the sushi started to arrive, and I was in my happy place. Absolutely stuffed with delicious nigiri, I decided to have one more drink before heading back to the train station. In addition to their clever, tasty Run the Jewels-inspired cocktail menu, Crew offered a special holidays menu based on one of the greatest Christmas movies of all time, Die Hard. I know. Some of you would never consider Die Hard a Christmas film, and that's okay. For me, on this spooky journey, a little Die Hard Christmas cheer was exactly what I needed. I'm a sucker for a weird drink. I mean, I'd prefer it sounded, good. But I've had everything from spam-infused Malort tiki drinks to a shot infused with Szechuan peppers that left my mouth tingly and numb. Somehow, in spite of the catchy titles like Welcome to the Party Pal and Yippee-Ki-Yay, their bizarre Die Hard-inspired old-fashioned variation was the one that called to me. On paper, the TV dinner was a challenge. The combination of Salisbury gravy-infused whiskey, corn, raw sugar, roasted garlic bitters, and brownie were just weird enough that I had to try it. I ordered the drink, gave my server a patented, "Are we sure about this?" look, and then, with a knowing, "Oh yes," nod back, the deal was done. I arrived back at the Sacramento station still thinking about the TV dinner. All in all, I liked it. The stranger elements ended up being surprisingly balanced by just the right amount of sweet. I've regretted simpler, poorly executed classic drinks more, so this one was worth it. I timed everything just right. I made it back to the train station a full hour before departure, only to find out that the Coast Starlight had been delayed by unforeseen circumstances. How long? Who knew? Luckily, once again, the Amtrak upgrade served me well. I spent long hours on train station benches before, and it's not fun. The first class lounge of bottled water was a bit quieter and had comfortable couches. Full-on sushi and cozy, thanks to tasty cocktails, I dozed on one of those couches. The only other guest in the lounge was a nice elderly man named Jim. We chatted between cat naps, and I kept him informed on the delay. The Coast Starlight finally arrived around 5 a.m. We made it on board. I said goodnight to Jim and hoped that I'd get to see him again somewhere along the journey to Portland. I arrived to my roomette to find the bed made up and ready for me, and I was asleep within minutes. I slept late, which was definitely needed, and woke up to the call for lunch. I made my way to the dining car and was mildly surprised to see Jim with a nice couple sitting at my table. We talked, enjoyed the scenery, and shared stories about train travel, but decided to continue on in the observation car. I'd made it to a pivotal scene in the script I was working on and didn't want to stop. The change of location to the observation car was good for me. I got a lot done. By 8 p.m. that evening, the Coast Starlight finally rolled into Portland, my final destination. I said goodbye to Jim and wished him well. To be honest, I thought a lot about Jim since. Maybe we'll run into one another again on another trip one day. It didn't take long to get a car to my hotel. I was excited for this one. While probably not as haunted as the Stanley, McMenamin's hotels are always a delight when I'm visiting the Pacific Northwest. So how about a little history? In 1983, brothers Mike and Brian McMenamin opened their first microbrewery and pub. By 1991, the brothers and their team opened over a dozen more pubs, each with their own unique flair. In 1993, Mike and Brian took a big step, transforming a 74-acre former poor farm into Edgefield Hotel, Restaurant, and Winery. In the following years, McMenamin's grew and grew, adding boutique hotels, restaurants, and pubs all throughout Oregon and even up into Washington. In 2011, 100 years after its construction, McMenamin's acquired the Crystal Hotel and Ballroom at the edge of Portland's Pearl District. I checked into the Crystal Hotel, and as much as I wanted to relax after my long train ride, explore the hotel, and turn in early, I didn't have long in Portland, so I needed to make the most of it. I dropped off the bags in my room, made my way back downstairs, and headed out to meet a fellow comic creator at one of my favorite cocktail spots in Portland, the Scotch Lodge. I think about the Scotch Lodge a lot. It's exactly the kind of place I want to pack up brick by brick, bottle by bottle, and bring back home. The term curated can get overused and sort of gets a bad rap, but Tommy Clues and Chef Tim Artale have truly created something that just exemplifies the term. My buddy Steven and I got caught up and dined like kings, eating our way through the menu of bread and whipped ricotta, arancini, and beef tartare. And there were drinks. Definitely drinks. After a lovely first evening in Portland, I made my way back to the Crystal Hotel. I walked the halls, appreciating the whimsy and wonder that McMenamin's brings to all of their hotels. These hotels are something special, art covering every surface, a reminder that there's a bit of strange magic just around every corner. I opened the window and let the cool, rainy Pacific Northwest air into my room that night and slept like a baby. I woke early the next morning. I had exploring to do after all, but first I made my way down to the soaking pool, a little oasis hidden below street level there in the Pearl District. After nearly a week of travel, strange beds, and haunted hotels, the warm water did me good. One of my favorite things about McMenamin's is their passport. Think of the passport as a big scavenger hunt. You get a stamp for visiting each of their over 50 locations. On top of that, there are special little side quests at nearly every location. Scavenger hunts, where you have to search the hotel or pub for a particular piece of artwork or photograph hidden somewhere on site. And for each thing you solve, there's a nice little prize featuring a bit of McMenamin's merch. You can pick a passport up for just $35 at any McMenamin's location. It's worth it. I love it, and one day, I might even complete all the challenges and get the big prize. After securing as many stamps as I could from the Crystal Hotel, at just after 8 in the morning, I headed out for a bit of breakfast. My editor-in-chief, Jamie Rich, a longtime resident of Portland, before scurrying off to the land of Boise, Idaho, suggested that I should stop at the cleverly named breakfast food truck, Fried Egg I'm in Love. I snagged a sriracha mix-a-lot sandwich, ate the whole thing, standing there downtown, and once again found myself contemplating how to steal this amazing bit of food truck goodness back home to the Midwest with me. Now, this is a show about horror and the strange and unusual, so I couldn't visit Portland without a trip to Voodoo Donuts. Voodoo Donuts is a funky fun shop that has gone from being a Portland staple to having over 20 locations spread across 7 states. They're big, they're bold, and definitely worth a visit when you're in town. And look, voodoo's not for everybody. So after a bit more exploring around and sending a box of dirty laundry wrapped treasures back home, I just had to hit my favorite spot for donuts in Portland, Blue Star Donuts. Now that's good. Hopped up on a bit too much sugar and caffeine, I made my way back to the Pearl District to visit another Portland staple, Powell's Books. Since 1971, Powell's Books has been and remains the world's largest independent bookstore. I've been visiting Powell's myself for nearly 30 years, and even after all this time, it makes me happy to walk through those doors. There's always something to find, from paperbacks from my favorite horror authors, books on the mystical and strange, and even delightfully bizarre prints from Madame Talbot's Victorian lowbrow. Now, when it comes to books, I'm a casual reader, not really that much of a collector. I have a few rare sentimental volumes here and there, but most of my collection consists of much-loved paperbacks and such. Even with that, I can't help but visit Powell's Rare Books room. Every time I'm there, I marvel at their collection of beautiful and pricey volumes of Frank L. Baum's Oz books and other bits of gorgeousness. And this time, something did catch my eye, and fit into my budget. A copy of the strange little children's book, The Happy Little Handsaw, produced in 1955 from the West Coast Lumbermen's Association. After that, I packed up my things at the Crystal Hotel and made my way to the second and final location in Portland. Probably my favorite McMenamins location in Portland is the Kennedy School. It probably doesn't hurt that, like most McMenamins locations, rumors of hauntings abound. So much so, in fact, that they keep a ghost log book at the front desk. In 1997, the McMenamin brothers reopened the long-abandoned Kennedy School in northeast Portland. The school was given new life, featuring a hotel, movie theater, several pubs, and a restaurant. Like all McMenamin's locations, Kennedy School is decorated featuring endless corridors of murals, photographs, and artwork. But there's something a little extra unsettling about the murals at Kennedy School, some haunting connection to the generations of Kennedy students and teachers that wandered the halls, and maybe still do. As usual, I was on the move and didn't have long before I needed to meet my good friends Ken and Tracy for dinner and drinks. I dropped off my bags in room 101, the Margaret Schneider Suite, a cozy, if slightly little room, retrofitted from a classroom in days gone by. Before dinner, my gracious host joined me for a quick visit to Paxton's Gate, a wonderful little shop featuring oddities, books, plants, and an amazing collection of specimens, ranging from skulls to beautiful and charming mounted creatures of all sorts. Next up, we stopped for drinks at one of my favorite tiki bars in the Pacific Northwest, Halepele. With dinner reservations, we only had time for one drink, and with 3 of us there, why not go big? We ordered the Volcano Bowl, a flaming tropical delight that came with a sound and light show and straws long enough to make Daniel Plainview from There Will Be Blood proud. Halepele was a delight as always, and as usual, I had to pick up one of their signature mugs on the way out. After enjoying the tiki goodness, we made our way to Rangoon Bistro for an absolutely fantastic meal of Burmese food. Every bite, from the lapet salad to the lemongrass marinated fried chicken, was spot on perfect. It was an amazing evening with the best of friends. I couldn't ask for anything more. I made my way back to the hotel to get some rest. I just had one more full day in Portland and had to make it count. I got up and around the following morning, finished a work Zoom call, and made my way out into the chilly Pacific Northwest December rain. I wasn't about to let that stop me. Today was the day, the culmination of this Shining Excursion. But before I made my way to the Timberline Lodge on Mount Hood, I had a few more important stops to make. First up, lunch. I'd heard rumors that the best sandwich in Portland was at a spot called Pasture PDX. With a claim like that, I just had to give it a try. I stood in the lunch rush line and ordered myself their famous OG sandwich, a pickle plate, and one of their hazelnut cookies, available only while supplies last. It should probably come as no surprise that I've enjoyed a sandwich or two, but I'm going to be thinking about the OG for a long time. This one, it's going to haunt me. With the OG demolished and the rest of my cookie packed safely away for later, I made my way across town to one of the most whimsically weird and delightful spots in Portland, the freaky but true Peculiarium. I visited a lot of strange and unusual places over the years. I've seen everything, from terrifying haunted castles to vast collections of carefully curated oddities, and I've loved them all. Established in 1972, the Peculiarium is an amazing collection of unique novelties, artwork, and weirdness. It's not a huge space, but what it lacks in size, the Peculiarium more than makes up for by packing every square inch of every room with spooky weird joy. After I made my way through the collection, I made my exit through the gift shop, where I chatted with the owner about the place. It was nice to see that the joy for the weird and wonderful was shared by the people running the shop. Even though after nearly 2 weeks on this excursion and my bags were already overpacked with all my various finds, I still found a few items that I couldn't live without. I said goodbye to the peculiarium, thinking that I definitely want to visit again next time I was in town. Now, I didn't have long before we'd head out for the grand finale of the Shining Excursion, so I quickly made my way across town to Cosmic Monkey Comics for a visit. Cosmic Monkey is a Portland institution and easily one of my favorite shops in town. It's the kind of place where I find something new and exciting that, in spite of working in comics, haven't even heard of before walking into the shop. I chatted with Andy and his crew for a while, picked up a few comics before heading back out to meet my ride and head to the Timberline Lodge on Mount Hood. Mount Hood and the Timberline are just over an hour and a half outside of Portland. Luckily, Emma, the daughter of my friends Ken and Tracy, offered to play guide and take me. It was a rainy afternoon, but we weren't about to let that stop us. We caught up on life, talked about TV, and this weird little adventure I was on. Before long, we made it up to Mount Hood and the Timberline Lodge. The Timberline Lodge opened its doors in February of 1938 with the help of Roosevelt's New Deal, in part using funding from the WPA and CCC. There were ups and downs for the Timberline. The lodge closed during World War II for a time. They reopened and closed again in 1955 due to various somewhat unsavory complexities. Later that year, though, things took a turn. Richard L. Constrom convinced the National Forest Service that the hotel deserved one more chance. Thanks to Constrom's vision and the growing popularity of skiing, the Timberline started a new era of growth and success. The first time I heard about the Timberline was summer of 1996. I was visiting family in Oregon, and while we were driving from Portland to Bend, my brother-in-law Dale looked back as we approached Mount Hood and said, "You want to see the hotel from The Shining?" We drove up the mountain, crested the hill, and there it was, in all its glory. Now, the internet was new back then, and DVDs wouldn't really be much of a thing for a couple of years. So in spite of it being one of my favorite movies, I didn't know much about the history of making The Shining. I stood outside, marveling at the place. There it was. I ran inside, excited to see the lobby from the movie, those elevators. And none of it was there. It wasn't until later that I learned the whole story of the making of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, that the book was based on the Stanley in Estes Park, Colorado, that the opening shots along the winding road on the way to the Overlook were actually filmed at Glacier National Park, that those amazing hotel interiors were based on the Ahwahnee Hotel in Yosemite National Park, and actually all shot on sound stages in Elstree Studios in England. In fact, only the establishing shots from the Timberline were used in the film. Most of the exterior shots in the film, including the iconic scene with Danny escaping out of the bathroom window and sliding down the snowy bank, were actually filmed on a full-scale replica set at Elstree. But all that's okay, because that's the magic of movies. All these years later, I found myself back at the Timberline Lodge. And even though we only saw a bit of the actual lodge in the film, the weather was a perfect match. It felt like something right out of The Shining. We went inside, walked around, and warmed up a bit. All these years later, I was less disappointed that it wasn't the interiors from the film, and just enjoyed the lovely, still somewhat creepy hotel for what it is. Speaking of creepy, as I mentioned in the previous segment, while it was room 217 in the book, the management of the Timberline asked Kubrick to change the room to a non-existent room 237 out of fear that future guests would be afraid to stay there. The Timberline also vehemently insists that the hotel is in no way haunted. Yeah, sure. Oh, and to this day, room 217 is one of the most requested rooms at the Timberline Lodge. That makes me smile. As much as I would have loved to stay at the Timberline, I was set to leave for home early the next morning. We made our way back to Portland. I was grateful to Emma for playing tour guide on the trip up the mountain. I was even more grateful that we were able to meet up with her parents, my friends Ken and Tracy again, for drinks at the Bible Club in Selwood. The Bible Club is a delightful little speakeasy, hidden inside an unassuming bungalow. It's a perfect little spot, and has a great vibe and even better drinks. The Bible Club is another spot that I wish I could just bring back home with me. After saying goodbye to wonderful friends, I made my way back to Burnside to meet up with my pal Stephen for one last dinner in Portland. What better way to celebrate the end of an adventure than steaks at an institution like Laurelhurst Market? We talked about the trip, making comics, and just had a great time. But like all good things, it had to come to an end. I had an early flight to catch after all. I made my way back to the Kennedy School and walked through one of my favorite pubs on the way back to my room. As much as I would have liked to have had one more drink, soak up the atmosphere, and reflect on the Shining Excursion, bed was calling my name. I woke up before my alarm, packed away the last few things, and said goodbye to the Margaret Schneider suite. I have a lot of love for Kennedy School. As I make my way down those dark halls, I thought about all the generations of students and teachers that roamed those halls before me. Maybe, just maybe, some of them still do. I arrived at PDX with plenty of time to spare. I was going home, and I was glad to do so. I love travel. I love exploring weird places, eating all the foods, drinking all the drinks, and meeting interesting and new people along the way. The Shining Excursion will always be special to me. I'm so glad I got to share it with you. So there you have it, part 2 of the Shining Excursion. I had a lot of fun in this crazy adventure, and you might be wondering, what's next? Well, I recently took a trip back to Denver to visit an amazing art exhibit experience and further explore the weirder side of the Mile High City over the holidays. After that, I'm taking a deep dive into the strange side of Los Angeles, Seattle, Chicago, and Kansas City. It's going to be a fantastically spooky time, and I can't wait to share it with all of you. So that's it for episode 2 of Curious Haunts. If you have a weird, wonderful, spooky place you feel like I should visit, please let me know. And if you'd like to join me on this curious, haunting journey, please like, follow, and subscribe. And if you know a fellow traveler who, like you, is drawn to the strange and unusual, I'd appreciate you sharing Curious Haunts with them. I'll see you again in 2 weeks. Cheers.